What I want to know is how does one get involved in doing rock work as a woman? Do you really, really want to know? Or do you just want the rehearsed response that I always give? What would happen if we chose to really tell the truth about ourselves? Like if we really, really just told the real truth of our lives. I'm not saying that it's true. I'm saying that it's my truth.
You're listening to Hammered.
Meeting up with Lisa sort of sent all my self-improvement out the window. We started meeting after work, and she had my telephone number at Regina's house, so I had a phone in my room, and she would call, and if I answered, she would talk, but if anybody else would answer, she would hang up. And so that started this pattern of like going after work and meeting up somewhere and, either going to a bar or just hanging out in the ice cream truck or going to a hotel. There was always some way to sort of hook up and do something that you shouldn't be doing. And it was like this addiction to adrenaline. And I remember riding downtown on my motorcycle. We would ride around in all the tall buildings and just kind of ride and, look up at the buildings. And I had this fantasy of like being like this free spirit. And it literally was just a fantasy. Riding around town with this girl on the back of my motorcycle and laughing and, having a buzz. And then we would have to go back, and she would have to be back before Allison would get home, and I would have to be back at a decent hour so that I didn't create a problem with Regina or Tim. And I would kind of come in the house and, hey, and just real superficial, and that relationship was starting to get strained and uncomfortable. And I felt really guilty. And I remember thinking, I need to be doing something to help them around this house. I didn't lift a finger. And then I had this justification that I'm paying my rent. Why should I have to do anything? It's my room, and I had this like entitlement, like that just because I was paying them their little piddly $200 a month, I figured that I could come and go as I pleased, but I never attempted to buy groceries or help out with anything. And I didn't really eat there. I didn't spend much time there. I would bring in a few things here and there, but my justification was always I'm on my motorcycle, so I can't really shop or anything. So it was very abusive on my part, and I have a lot of shame and a lot of guilt about that because I never really made amends, or I never really tried to help them out. And I look back on that and I do feel really bad about that time period. But I continued on with my little shenanigans, and I was completely 100% powerless over it. It would take me over more than any kind of drug. Just the part of meeting someone or just being with another human being, preferably a female, that could take away all my misery and all of my depression. And it was that constant seeking outside of myself, for that magical other. I kept thinking, if I just met the right person. And I knew that Lisa wasn't the right person, but there was a chemistry there. And I think sometimes there's this lost soul syndrome it's as though, one sick need meets another sick need, and you're off and running. And neither one of us cared. Both of us, I feel like we're in the same position. We were just in situations where there was no intimate connection, but there was a physical connection that would just take care of that part of yourself so that you could keep functioning. And it gave me something kind of to look forward to. And so we would plan these little get-togethers after work, and therefore I'd have something during the daytime to kind of keep me charged to go and to get it done. Well, one thing I started noticing at the new job was now not so new, but the other driver, he was a pretty weird guy, and he kind of talked about his football stuff, which always kind of got on my nerves. But I started seeing him in the mornings at the post office, and we would have to get there super early, and I would see him, and he would look pretty bad, and he would look, really hungover, and his eyes would be real bloodshot, and he looked like he was having a hard time functioning. And so I used to kind of say stuff to him like, "Are you okay?" And he'd be like, "Yeah, yeah, I'm fine." And then there was this other guy that worked at the post office. He was a post office employee, and he would come out on the loading docks, and he was a real good-looking guy. He was real tall and big, broad shoulders. He looked like he worked out and stuff, and he wore glasses, and I always used to think, what would he look like without those glasses? Back then, glasses weren't like fashionable. I always wanted to take those glasses off of him and see him without them. But anyway, he was kind of to himself, and he wouldn't really smile or anything, but he'd kind of give you like the head nod. And I noticed him and the football driver, they had sort of an interaction with each other. And I kind of started noticing that. And I was very observant. That's one thing about myself. I've always been a very observant person. And I don't know if it's because I'm watching over my own shoulder because I'm so self-absorbed, but I would watch their interaction like they kind of knew each other, or they knew something. So I sort of honed in on that for a little while. And so then I started coming in the afternoons because you have to drop off your outgoing mail. And I remember this one day, the good-looking employee, postal guy, came up to me, and he kind of started making small talk. And he just sort of, was trying to get to know me a little bit. And I was a little bit afraid of him. I just thought I better not tell him too much information. And then this one day I came in, and he handed me some money. He goes, "Hey, can you do me a favor?" And I said, "What?" And he goes, "Tomorrow when you come in the morning, do you think you could bring me a 6-pack of beer?" And I went, "Seriously, in the morning?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "What kind?" "Old Milwaukee's fine." And I was like, "Ooh, Old Milwaukee, gross." So, but I did it, of course. The next morning I stopped in my van and I got him a 6-pack. And when I came in, I put it in a mail bin and I just gave it to him. And I don't know where he hid it, but he took it in and he hid it somewhere. So I started figuring out that he was getting beer from the other driver, Todd, and now me. And so I understood. I thought, well, maybe has a problem, or maybe he just can't get through the day, or maybe his job's so fucking boring. And so we kind of started this little fun little drop-off, pick-up, drop-off. And then I started bringing it to him in the afternoons. And apparently he worked pretty long shifts, and so he kind of used that, I think, as an excuse. Say he had a lot of overtime, and he didn't have much of a social life. And the more we got to talk, the more we started kind of becoming friends and joking around. And I started seeing his humor. He had a really dry sense of humor. His name was Rick. And I really started finding myself attracted to him in some kind of weird way. I wanted to take his glasses off, but I just kept thinking, this guy's kind of funny. He was really sarcastic, but he had a real dry sense of humor, and he seemed like a really good worker. And all the people always would ask him, what to do. It was kind of like he was a supervisor over a lot of the dock workers, the loading dock people and stuff. So that was a new little thing that started going on with this little cat and mouse interaction. And then back at the shop, I always call it the shop for some reason. That's just old ice cream terminology. But back at the mail shop, my friend Debbie, who was working on the inside, started to have some drama with the boss, Wayne. And I could tell that he was shutting her down a little bit. And I don't know, she was kind of getting like, I think she wanted him to leave the wife, in which that's not going to happen. But it's so interesting to me that when a person finds out that you do drugs, it's like now you're in this inner circle. And apparently she shared with him, that I was cool. That was like a signal. And so now the owner, Wayne, the Al Pacino with the bug eyes, who was always coked out, knew that I was cool and that I could be trusted. And so they started giving me a little more responsibility. And so I started buying some cocaine from Debbie because she could get it from Wayne. And so it would pass along to me. Well, now I could do cocaine in the daytime while I'm out delivering my mail, picking up my mail, interacting with all the people out in the world in this downtown district. And so, when you do cocaine, you become like larger than life. There's something that happens inside where you think that you are so in control and that you're so great and funny and beautiful and talented. And so that drug would help me to go out there and to perform even better. And so with all of that, by the afternoon, I would start feeling kind of bad. And of course, I would start drinking to be able to sort of calm that down so that I would be able to go and have an evening. Everything was dependent on what I wanted and needed. I didn't take anybody else into consideration. As long as somebody else was serving me in some capacity, then I would associate with them. If not, I didn't have any real use for them. And that's real sad and that's real abusive. But I never saw it like that. I just saw it like I'm just surviving in the world, which there's some truth to that too. Because I think at, 23 years old, 22, 23 years old, there's no reference point. All I had was my past reference points, which were self-induced. There was nothing that was invigorating to learn. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have anybody to really guide me except Regina, who had tried. And I was starting to get resentful at home because I felt like they were angry at me. Well, hell yeah, they should have been angry at me. But I kept coming and going and coming and going and coming and going. And then the weekends, of course, would be my time to go out. I would feel like, oh, I had worked all week and now I get to go out because it's the weekend. And there's something about Friday. There's something about Friday that sends off an adrenaline rush in your body. And that's the rush. The adrenaline rush is, I think, what I was mostly addicted to. And I remember Friday mornings, like I couldn't wait to get to work. I couldn't wait to get it over with and get it done because it was Friday. And I think that Friday thing stems all the way back into high school. of having Friday nights, of going to the football games with all my girl basketball player friends. And, we would go and get beer and camp out and have these drunken campouts in the woods. And there was this one particular girl that I would end up with, and we would kind of hide. Everybody'd be so fucking drunk that nobody knew that we were kind of together. So there was always this secret lifestyle that was happening behind the scenes. How do you get behind the scenes of behind the scenes? Because it was behind the scenes being in the woods with the girls drinking, but then you go on behind the scenes from that. So I was addicted to the behind the scenes life. And I remember going in this place called the Cove, and it was this cesspool of sin, they called it. It was a men's bar that was just this dive, and it was after hours. So it was after the other bars would close around 3 a.m., and somehow I would find myself going through that door into the Cove. And I remember Michael Jackson's Thriller was really popular, and there was a widescreen TV in the bar, and it would have the whole video of Thriller from start to finish when it's kind of like a movie. And I remember sitting there watching that, and I remember running into this girl that had played basketball at Georgia Tech, and I knew her from back when I was in South Carolina. She had come to visit one of my friends, and I was really attracted to her. Well, I ran into her in the Cove, and she had a bag of coke, and so we ended up in the bathroom doing cocaine in this nasty ass, gross bathroom. But, you just do whatever. It doesn't matter. It's like you can just overlook all of that. And then I remember waking up with her in her Georgia Tech apartment somewhere downtown off North Avenue. And I woke up, and there we were. And I'm like, oh, my God, I've got to find my motorcycle. And she gave me money for a taxi, and I had to find the motorcycle and then get back home. And those mornings of waking up in these situations would just send off like an alarm clock in my heart. And it was like a fucking nervous fucking breakdown, and I would just panic. But once I would find that motorcycle and I would find my way back home, then I could kind of regroup and usually go do it again. Usually just go back out there and do it again. And this pattern was just going on and on and on. And sometimes I would kind of pop in and see my dad, I would ride by the Amber Apartments and kind of swing in there and say hello to him. And he'd ask me how it was going. And I'd talk real big, like my job was great and the boss loved me and they were giving me more responsibility and blah, blah, blah. And I think he thought I was doing okay because I had trimmed down a little bit. I think if you lose weight in my family and you look good, then they think you're doing good. They don't know that you're fucking doing cocaine and not eating and just out there running ragged, so no wonder you're losing weight. But I think, I had like a work uniform and I looked better than I had looked in a while to him. All of that makes me very, very sad when I look back on it, because I know that he only wanted me to be okay. I know that he only wanted the best for me, even though he attributed to this nightmare. He didn't know that. The old saying, well, they did the best they could. I really think he did. And I know his history. And I remember my Nanny Haynie one time. That was my grandmother on his side, his mother. And I remember asking her, we were looking at some old photos, and she there was a picture of my daddy in his army uniform. She said, Lord, honey, that was the night before he had to go on and they were going to take him to Korea. And I said, where was he going? And, oh, he's going to go to that Korean War. And she said she heard him in his bedroom and he was crying. And I said, well, Nanny, did you go in there and talk to him? Oh, no. I just left him alone. And he went right after high school. I guess, I don't know if it was a draft or enlisted, but he had to go. And he had never left Gwinnett County, Georgia in his life. And to leave that country town and to have to go, that was pretty scary. And then after knowing my grandfather, his father, who was just a total depressive, dark, depressive, gloom and doom, he sat under a pear tree my entire childhood. And every Christmas it was like, well, I won't be here next year. I won't make it to next Christmas. And it'd be like, yeah, you will. And he'd be there the next Christmas. And that was a perpetual thing. And, we always felt real bad for him and kind of steered clear. But I would hear stories about what had happened to my daddy growing up and little things that he got in trouble for. And when I say getting in trouble, it's like getting a beating with a belt or a stick or whatever. And I knew that my daddy had some pretty bad abuse, but that was just how people raised their young'uns. It's fucked up, and I knew it was, but he just turned around and did the same thing to us. But I felt bad for my dad, and I had a lot of guilt around everything I had done to him. And then I also had the flip side of that of being a victim. And all of this belief that I wouldn't be like this if you hadn't have done what you did to me. This whole ongoing blame game. And I remember when I was a kid, me and my brother one time, my dad had us down in the garden. And when I say garden, I'm talking like a long field. It wasn't like a pretty little garden. It was a fucking field. And he took ropes and he made me take my shirt off. I was about 5 or 6 years old. And he said, take that shirt off, Curly. It's too hot. And he strapped these ropes across our chest like an X. And I had on cowboy boots with no socks and blue jean shorts. And that's all I had on. I remember this. And he said, stick your lip out. And he packed some Copenhagen in the front of our lips. And he said, now don't swallow it. If you swallow it, that juice, that'll make you sick and make you dizzy. And so he got us ready and he put these ropes over us and he tied it to this plow. It was one of those like self-push plows that had a wheel, like a metal wheel on the front and a blade on the back. I guess it was more of a cultivator, but it was manual. And so then he would go, all right, y'all go. And we were kind of like little oxen. And we would pull him. And, there was a part of me that would sort of laugh about it. And my brother, we'd sort of laugh. And I remember looking down at my legs. And I remember thinking, I'm going to have good legs. I'm going to have good legs. I'm going to have good, strong legs. I was doing like positive affirmations. And I didn't even know it at that time. I felt like I was creating these legs. And so was my brother. By the time my brother got to high school, his nickname in high school was Body Beautiful. And then when I got to high school, I had some pretty damn strong legs. And so I guess there's something positive that comes out of that. We were athletic and we were fit. But of course, when I got in the therapy chair, that was a whole nother visitation, a whole nother perspective of that experience. But I never looked at it like that until later on. But stopping by my dad's at the Amber Apartments and bragging about my new job and how well I was doing was kind of setting him up when I look back over the whole thing. So I continued on this way of day after day after day after day of week after week after week of going to work, suiting up, showing up. It was just like the ice cream days. All that had changed was the van. All that has changed, there wasn't a clown and a menu on the van. Now there was a corporate world and a bunch of fucking business people and me and running in and out of these buildings. I was actually just bringing them something, kind of like selling them ice cream, but now I'm bringing their mail because they needed that mail and they were excited to get that mail. And I was becoming sort of their little somebody to break up their day, I guess you'd say. And the more coke I would do, the more talkative I became because I couldn't talk without it. There's no way I would be talking without it because my MO was I would start out something very quiet and to myself and sort of mysterious. And that would intrigue people to want to ask you questions and know more about you. Oh, I'm not telling you anything. But the minute I start doing the coke, then I'm a how are you today? Well, how you been doing? And, oh, is that a picture of your dog? And getting all involved and all up in their business. And they loved it. People love to talk about themselves. And so this was a whole new world. And I was managing it. Well, one night I came by the liquor store and I grabbed some Absolute vodka, and I didn't have plans that night. And I thought, I'm just going to go home. I'm going to go to bed at a decent time because sometimes I think I would run myself so ragged that I would have to take a break like midweek. And I remember coming in and Tim and Regina were both there and they sort of looked at me with that look. And oh, that look I can trace back to many, many, many times in my life. I've had that look from a lot of different people. And so I sort of said hey to them, and they left me a plate of dinner, which was very nice. And they would always be thoughtful in that way. And I sort of grabbed this plate and went upstairs and brought it back downstairs. Well, in the meantime, I'd been swigging on this bottle of Absolute vodka in my bedroom. And I came down and they asked me a couple of questions, and something that they said, and I can't remember what it was, but it sort of pissed me off. So I went back upstairs and I continued to drink. And then I started getting angry and I kept drinking and drinking, and I was getting more angry and more victim-y and more they're accusing me of something. And it's so funny how your mind can twist something into a completely untruth. Well, all I remember about the next hours were that I came downstairs and I started picking an argument with them. And then it turned into this huge, violent burst of activity. And I remember taking some magazines and throwing some magazines. And I only have flashes of this entire thing, but the next day when I woke up, I was so sick. And I did my morning vomiting and grossness. And I was sitting on the edge of my bed, and I just sat there, and I had my hands kind of up over my face, and all of a sudden my bedroom door was kicked open, and Regina was standing there, and she had this book in her hands, and she looked at me, and she said, "I want you to get out of here." She said, "I'm going to give you a week to find a place." And then she threw this book. It was a hardback, blue, big book. And it literally, the corner of it hit the side of my skull and landed on the bed. And when I turned around and looked at that freaking book, it was this blue sort of canvas cover. And I looked at it and it said, Alcoholics Anonymous.
Hammered is recorded and produced in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Asheville, North Carolina. It's narrated by Jill Haynie, produced by Maggie Briggs and Jill Haynie, and with sound design, editing, and music by Alexander Rodriguez. Our beautiful artwork was created by Lauren Caddick, and we'd like to send a special thanks out there to Minnie and Robin. You can check out our website, podcasthammered.com, and follow us on social media for updates.